Hi, this is Pod Save the UK.
I'm Coco Khan.
And I'm Nish Kumar.
And this week we're taking you to the club. If we can find one open, that is.
Yes, we're looking at the state of Britain's nightlife as clubs and music venues close at an alarming rate.
Is the nighttime economy a priority for our politicians?
Plus, are the men in suits ruining women's football? Spoiler alert, the answer, yes. Hi, Coco.
Hi, Nish. Welcome back.
I'm back in the studio after my COVID exile.
I know, it's hard having a retro illness.
Yeah, it is hard. It was like having consumption. I'm absolutely fine. I'm testing negative, so I'm safe to be in a soundproof bunker with you again.
That's good, because I do like circulating air. Do you know what I mean? That's important to me. It was really on my rider when I got this role. Air must circulate at all times.
How's your week?
Do you know what? I came back off honeymoon, didn't I, last week? And I am still finding it really hard to adapt. I've got terrible jet lag. I still wake up at 4 a.m, just me and the foxes. I'm finding it quite hard to adjust back to London
so you're still
time.
waking up at 4 a.m. every day?
I still wake up at 4 a.m. It's awful. I don't want to, oh, it's so hard to wake up early. But at the same time, it's very quiet. There's nothing going on at 4 a.m. There's nothing on the TV. You have to tiptoe around because no one else is up. It's a very lonely moment.
Just you. It's just you and the foxes. That's it.
The foxes, the only people around. Yeah.
Well, look, it feels like in terms of the week's news, we're back in, what's normally called in the UK the silly season in terms of political news. It used to be known as that in newsrooms because traditionally during the summer when Parliament's in recess, not much is happening. People are on holiday. But the last few years, it's been absolute chaos, right? It's been absolute anarchy. On this day last year, soon-to-be Prime Minister Rishi Sunak had ruled out taking a role in soon-to-be Prime Minister and also soon-to-be ex-Prime Minister Liz Truss's cabinet. 2 years ago, Boris Johnson was scrambling to evacuate Afghanistan, while in 2020, Number 10 was dealing with COVID whilst wrestling with a Brexit trade deal. So there's always been some kind of shit show happening in August in the last few years. And this year, things have gone quiet. Not because anything has improved. Things are still very bad for people living in this country. But it does seem as though politicians have thought, you know what? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it is broke, still don't bother fixing it and fuck off to Disneyland.
Are you familiar with the very popular wellness program of journaling? Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am aware of the concept of journaling, yes.
Okay. And keeping a gratitude diary?
Yes.
Well, I'm just saying, for our listeners, if you're looking for something that it's not last year or the year before on this day, it's maybe, that's some material.
Are you suggesting that the Conservative Party is going to adapt Tony Blair's 1997 slogan of things can only get better into things could have been considerably worse and also have been recently? Vote Tory.
Listen, you know what? You're joking now, but I guarantee you that it's going to end up, you're manifesting. Oh my God, you're doing it right now, babe.
Well, I'm manifesting the next Tory Party slogan.
This is all part of the process. You're doing it.
It's either that or at the moment, seemingly, based on some of the rhetoric coming off the Conservative Party, the next Tory election slogan is going to be vote for us or fuck off back to France.
And there's going to be someone in an ad agency being like, look, babe, it's evergreen. It could be 2023. It could be 1704. It could be
We still want a lot of people who live in this country to fuck off to a different country.
Take your lace-making skills with you. Very obscure joke. But even though it's a little bit quiet in Westminster, there's no shortage of political drama on the other side of the Atlantic. The Republican presidential candidates are holding their first debate on Wednesday. Donald Trump, of course, is skipping it. He's expected to be arrested the following day on charges of attempting to overturn his 2020 election defeat in the state of Georgia. And if you want the best coverage on that, we have to recommend you to our sister podcast, Pod Save America.
One name has dominated the news this week. Lucy Letby, the most prolific child serial killer in modern British history. The 33-year-old neonatal nurse was convicted of murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 6 more at the Countess of Chester Hospital between 2015 and 16.
On Monday, she was sentenced to a whole life term, meaning she will never be released from prison. We may never know why she did it, but determining how she was able to commit such profoundly horrific crimes is now fundamental. We need answers for her victims and their families to just ensure those lessons are learned and hold those to account who could have stopped Lucy Letby sooner.
So the political fallout of this deeply shocking case has centred on two specific issues. Letby refused to come to the court to be present for her sentencing, a final insult to her victims' families as they read out victim impact statements intended for her ears. Back in December last year, in response to other high-profile cases, the then Justice Secretary Dominic Raab promised to change the law to force convicted criminals to attend sentencing, but so far nothing's happened on that. Labour leader Keir Starmer has told the government to stop dragging their heels over the law change, and Rishi Sunak has now reaffirmed the government's commitment to do it.
The second issue is the inquiry. Starmer has also joined victims and medical experts in calling on the government to upgrade the independent inquiry to a statutory one. That would give a judge the power to compel witnesses to attend and for evidence to be produced. Under that public pressure, the government is now saying a statutory inquiry is on the table.
The problem here is I sometimes don't know what we're looking for from our political leaders in this kind of moment. You're talking about someone who's found guilty of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder another 6, and there are still questions being asked about whether there are more children that she's tried to kill. With a crime like this that's so heinous, I just think with this, there isn't really a value in just jumping in with an opinion. And listen, I know that we do a show that is all about us just offering up our opinions. And in this specific instance, it feels like a strange thing to say, but actually, I think people need to wait and let the inquiries do their work. The government has reassured the public that they have the capacity to upgrade that independent inquiry to a statutory one, which, as you say, would give the judges power to compel witnesses to attend and evidence be produced, which is really important. The crucial thing here is we need to establish what people knew about what Lucy Letby was doing, what concerns were raised, and why those concerns weren't acted upon much more quickly. In a moment like this, it feels like what everybody desperately wants is a quick solution.
Yes.
But it's the boring, hard work and the detail and the investigation and then the holding of people responsible to be accountable for their actions or inactions that is really going to matter here. And so I just feel like there's no value in sound bites.
Absolutely. And actually, I think there's probably many examples where politicians, are quick to give a response because they want to be part of the news agenda and they want to be seen to be saying something.
You know, as a member of the public, there's a part of me that wants some kind of leadership. There's a part of me that wants to hear somebody say, we are going to resolve this to make sure that it can never happen again. Like I want the reassurance of a soundbite because this is an act so unfathomably evil that it makes you afraid of being a human being.
Right.
Because the capacity of somebody to do this, it makes you afraid of what we as people are capable of. And so I think there's certainly a part of me that wants somebody to say, don't worry, we are going to make sure that nothing like this can ever happen again. Saying that, you can't just magic that and you can't just will it into existence by saying it. I understand the impulse of people to want a quick fix.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's something like this, in a way you can understand greed. You can understand like someone's desire for power. You can understand these things. What on earth was this? This is why it cuts you in a completely different way. So I understand that the leaders need to be seen to be doing something. But the question is, is what they're doing the right thing? Is it done in haste? And also, please don't let it be the only thing. There's got to be more. We hope to keep saying it. And hopefully if other people can also keep saying things, then it will push our politicians to keep looking at this over the longer term.
So this week should have been a fantastic one to celebrate women's football. And the World Cup did throw up loads of potential heroes of the week, but it also threw up plenty of contenders for villain of the week, because whilst the women were on the pitch delivering thrills and drama, they were let down by the men in suits. The biggest problem in football remains all of the men in suits that run football.
So it's no surprise to hear that our villain of the week is Luis Rubiales, the president of the Spanish Football Federation. He kissed Spanish player Jenny Hermoso full on the lips as she lined up to receive her winner's medal. Creepy or what? I didn't like it, is what Hermoso said. She posted that on Instagram immediately afterwards. Spain's Equalities Minister, Irene Montero, said it's a form of sexual violence that women suffer on a daily basis.
And then, having done that, he even somehow managed to completely balls up apologising. He firstly told a Spanish broadcaster that it was a kiss between two friends celebrating something, and that those who saw it differently were idiots and stupid people. And then he went on to add, let's ignore them and enjoy the good things. After criticism on social media and from some Spanish politicians, he backtracked. And by Monday, he said, I was completely wrong. I have to admit it.
So let's hear him, shall we?
Estamos ante un hecho histórico, uno de los días más felices del fútbol español. Campeonas del mundo, una barbaridad.
Just to explain what's going on there, he basically does that classic thing of apologising, but kind of not apologising. There's a lot of shrugging. He looks baffled by what he calls the commotion. He says it seemed normal to him and the player, and says that if anyone has been damaged by this, I apologise. You know, I have to apologise.
But there's more. There's also footage of him grabbing his genitals and thrusting his groin at the celebrations. And he is quite close to the Queen of Spain and her teenage daughter at the time, which is obviously somehow makes something already bad even worse.
I cannot believe that celebration of grabbing one's genitals is still around. Like when I saw the clip of it, I've recently been rewatching The Office, the British Office, obviously. And there's a character, David Brent's got a mate called Chris Finch.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Of course I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Chris Finch energy coming off was
pure Chris Finch energy.
So
Chris Finch. For American listeners, Todd Packer. In the American version, the character is Todd Packer.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's very much an absolute Finch Packer energy.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to give you a bit more information about this clown, he's a 45-year-old former player. He's had something of a journeyman career as a defender. He once played 3 games for Hamilton Academical in Scotland. His Wikipedia page says he was not known for being a very skilled player, but he was tenacious. His nickname was Pundanor, which means pride. He may need to think of a new nickname, although I'm thinking maybe Finchy might be the one we could start.
I mean, the men's game at this point just sort of feels intrinsically and institutionally corrupted. And the Women's World Cup was such a triumph for the sport. You know, the attendances at the games were sort of record highs. Record numbers of people watch the games on television. You know, I'm an England football fan. It was a disappointing result.
Course, yeah.
The Lionesses had a great run in the tournament. So many great performances. A really strong winning team, really strong performance in the final. But again, people like Gianni Infantino, who I cannot believe he's still allowed near football. Like, I don't understand. I don't know what surgical procedure we need to extract this man from football. But he's the FIFA president and relentless gaff machine.
Right.
He doesn't technically qualify for Villain of the Week because his remarks happened last week, but we simply cannot let them pass. This is what he said.
I say to all the women that you have the power to change. Pick the right battles. Pick the right fights. You have the power to change. You have the power to convince us men what we have to do and what we don't have to do. You do it. Just do it. With me, with FIFA, you will find open doors. Just push the doors. They are open.
I mean...
Sorry, I shouldn't be laughing. What was going on there? I mean, oh God, for all the other feminists listening, can you believe it? We just needed to ask. It turns out all those women's rights that we have had to fight tooth and claw for, we just needed to ask. The doors were already open. Oh, God, if only we knew. Thank you so much, Gianni Infantino.
You have to remember that this man is the Martin Luther King of talking absolute bollocks. Like, he is right in terms of we should push the door, but the thing we should be pushing the door to do is to grab him by the scruff of the neck and throw him back out of the door. He's a man who works in professional football. Why has no one thought of slide tackling this motherfucker? Like, just go in hard on him.
It is funny how, like, yeah, women's football, and here we are talking about all the stupid men.
Yeah, it's terrible, which is a shame because there's so many women to celebrate from the tournament as a whole, specifically in the final. Massive, massive shout out to Mary Earps for saving the penalty and providing one of the greatest pieces of televised swearing. Say what you will about the Lionesses. Every year they provide, in the Euros final it was Jill Scott. This time, the close-up on Mary Earps as she screams, "Fuck off." To someone we don't know.
Well, I think
it's not even clear.
For everyone. I think it was just to everyone, like the audience.
It's not even clear. She saves a penalty. You know, as a goalkeeper, saving a penalty in a World Cup final is like, I mean, that's pretty much, that's as good as it gets. That's as big as it gets for a goalkeeper. And she had won the Golden Gloves prize for being the tournament's best keeper. You know, she's widely regarded as being one of the best goalkeepers in the world.
Right? That's
Mary Queen of Stops.
Yeah.
She saves the penalty. The camera, and I mean, I can only assume, because of where the final was held, it was an Australian camera crew who have and Australia as a nation has a deep appreciation for the art of obscenity. And I can only assume it was an Australian television director who encouraged the camera person to punch in on Mary Earps' face as she detonated the mother of all F-bombs.
Yeah.
Right into the camera. But yeah, she was excellent and exceptional throughout and did keep England in the game. Gutting that the Lionesses didn't win, but congratulations to Spain, and England will come again. You know, there's a huge amount of young talent in that team.
Well, on that note, coming up next, we'll be saving the UK's nightlife with guest club promoter Hannah Shogbola and DJ from Girls Don't Sink, Gaia Ahuja. Here on Pod Save the UK, we like to have a good time.
Yes, and regular listeners will know Coco to be one of the UK's most prominent ravers.
By prominent, he means ageing. But anyway, I was very sad to hear that the number of nightclubs in the UK has slumped to a record low, with more than 100 closing in the last year alone. 54% of major towns and cities have seen a decline in their nightlife. Back in 2021, MPs warned the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson that we faced an extinction event for nightlife, and I'm very sad to say it might well be here. It's sad for any of us that had formative years in clubs, myself included. You know, what even is coming of age if you're not using a fake ID to go to a club you're really not allowed? We do not condone this behaviour.
Yeah, none of this behaviour is condoned.
Yeah, you know, dancing like no one's watching. Maybe you even met your life partner there. I actually did. Met my husband in the smoking area of a club night. So there we go. But nonetheless, music is important to the UK. It's really important to marginalised communities, to share together, to commune. And it's also just really good vibes. So we're a bit sad about it, and today we're going to solve it.
Well, and also it's a massive part of the British economy. Like it actually has really meaningful impact. It's estimated that the nighttime economy, which it covers everything that's any businesses that are active between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. I am technically a part of the nighttime economy as a stand-up comedian, which I don't think anyone associates me with raving. Like that. Like, I think that's like...
Yeah, but you love live music.
I love live music.
That's all in the
I'm a stand-up comedian.
Yep.
And also I'm a huge contributor to the late-night kebab economy of the United Kingdom. I'm a stalwart of the British kebab industry. So like, but in monetary terms, it's reckoned for every £10 that's spent per seat inside a venue, another £17 is spent outside of it. And it's estimated to be worth £93.7 billion to the British economy. And in a moment where our economy is not as strong as it once was, we don't manufacture anything apart from racism, but we don't manufacture anything of value. It seems like a strange thing to not support something that has a real, genuine, meaningful economic impact in the country. The sector is struggling to recover from a combination of the pandemic, followed by the cost of living crisis, which has pushed up venue costs and also affected the amount people are actually able to go out and how much we spend when we do go out.
So, you know, as we were talking about earlier, it's not just nightclubs that are closing their doors, it's live gig venues too. And listen, you know, I'm a little raver, but we're talking about jazz as well. We're talking about even classical music, all kinds of audio expression fall into nightlife economy. And the Music Venue Trust warned that 2023 will inevitably be the worst year for venue closures since the body was created in 2014. The Nighttime Industries Association has said that the government has failed to consider the threats to the nighttime economy and is calling for targeted help in the autumn statement. That includes VAT help, energy, labour shortages and visas for live acts.
Yeah, it's a difficult and complicated picture, and there is political, social, and economic value to considering a conversation about the nightlife. So, in order to work out how much trouble our clubs and venues are in, and perhaps suggest some things we could do about it, we are thrilled to be joined by two guests today. We're joined by Hannah Shogbola, one of the only female black agents in the UK, and a fixture of the club. It says a fixture of the club circuit.
Wow.
Across London for
better live up to that then.
yeah, exactly.
And we're joined by Gaia Ahuja from Girls Don't Sing, a female DJ collective who play at some of the top clubs across the UK and Europe. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So guys, let's just get straight in here. What's happening in the nighttime economy? We talked about venue closing there, but is that the full story? How hard is it to put on a club night, for example?
I think, first and foremost, it is a tremendously difficult time currently for the nightlife culture. I think that we have had to face some hugely impactful changes since lockdown. I think the simplistic way to start this conversation is to look at the damaging impact that lockdown had, particularly on the live music space. We couldn't put on shows, we couldn't go out to shows. Even after the kind of restrictions happened after COVID, we were still put under tremendous pressure to, not be able to put on even nightclubs in particular were hugely damaged. We couldn't have more than, I think it was don't quote me on this, but 200 people inside a space. You had to go through all the leaps and jumps of taking COVID tests, making sure that you were able to go inside a club. When you put all of those things into that situation, it's just so damaging because particularly, these are spaces created for people to go, to feel free, to not feel trapped. Just like you were saying about how you met your husband and smoking. I love that point, so I just had to bring it back up because, it's particularly a nightclub environment in the electronic music space. This also came from a black queer community. It's this is where we need to go to feel free. So the impacts that we had post-COVID were, for me, the first point of the kind of downfall. I think post that, when we look at the current situation, inflation, we're all stripping back, I think. It costs a lot of money to go out, especially in London. And that has resulted in, the economy and the money's flowing through being heavily damaged.
Mm-hmm. I think, you're talking about the stems and the foundations, but I think even if we look at now, in the height of summer, we're in festival season. And, if I wasn't working and DJing, I would be saving up to be going to a festival. And I think particularly in my friendship group alone, they're not really investing in going to the nights out in London. And actually a lot of my friends that are putting on their own nights, particularly in London, they're really, really struggling because they've got a battle with festivals or holidays. And I think at the moment, people are saving up and they're prioritising going to the festivals within the height of summer rather than supporting club nights or, going to one-off events here and there throughout the summer. And I just think it's really, really hard, particularly in this season, to put on an event, to ensure that people come, to sell the tickets. And I think in London as well, you've just got such a melting pot of so many different nights, particularly around this time, this weekend alone. I can't imagine how many events and competition there's going to be around big bank holidays and in summer in general. And I think it's really taking a hit on, smaller independent venues and club collectives and promoters as well, massively.
And that's because people are because of the pressures of cost of living, people are now, it's a question of whittling down what you're going to do. And it starts to become, instead of I'm going to do this and this, it's I'm going to do this or this. So I'm either going to go to 4 club nights in London or Manchester or Edinburgh or wherever, or I'm going to go to one massive festival.
100%.
And so that's a consequence of the wider economic picture.
The thing about culture is that it's a muscle, and if you don't use it, then it can kind of wither away. And whether that's we're talking about club nights and things like that, but it could also be going to art galleries, it could also be museums, theatre, all of those things. Have you felt that the numbers, irrespective of the kind of cost of living aspect of it, I do appreciate that obviously helps it. But I'm just curious, did people's habits wither away when they couldn't start going to clubs as they used to in the pandemic?
Oh, 100%. We were just speaking about this before we came on and just talking about even our personal tastes when it comes to how we're embracing nightlife culture post-pandemic. And I think what we found, particularly on the live booking side, is that people aren't out until 7 or 8 in the morning anymore as much as they were previously. There's also become a habit of how people want to absorb live music, for example, or electronic DJs. With that, you can see, you know, people like Annie Mac doing the before midnight rave, which is obviously hitting a target audience, which is predominantly mothers, particularly people of her age. And that's actually been really well received because I don't think people want to be out as much. We were also having this discussion actually in work about a year ago. I don't know if anybody remembers, like, weirdly, like years and years ago, there's like a punk era where actually a lot of that community and that kind of age group, they were quite straight-laced and they didn't really want to go out until like, you know, stupid o'clock. And what we found is actually like the habits of even like consuming things like alcohol and so on and so forth at nightclubs isn't actually as high, depending on what genre of music they're going out on. But all of these things have resulted in us having to adapt the way that we put on shows. You know, for example, there was a point just after lockdown where I work with a lot of electronic DJs, and actually a lot of them are crossing over into the food space and doing like supper clubs, but with music, because you can do that in a more reasonable hour of like 7 till 10, and we can do that in spaces. Even I did one with Helena Starr at the ICA, which previously we'd probably never think to do something there, but we did because we knew that people were more likely to come out to that particular event than they would be maybe if we'd put on a club show. Now, you know, there is still communities that definitely are coming out later and still doing the things that we have done previously, but traditional habits, just to round it up, I think definitely have changed.
Changing tastes are great, and if we can adapt to a modern world where people are drinking less and they want to be out in the day and they want to get their 8 hours sleep, all power to it. But it cannot just be that we just need to adapt the industry to survive, because we are seeing clubs closing in their droves. Again, that extinction event. So I guess one of the things we want to get to is, you know, what is the problems that, for example, politicians should be fixing? So I'll kick it off. Noise complaints.
Oh, loads. Oh my gosh.
Have you felt this has become more of a problem then, that residents
100%.
complain?
Festivals have been actually pulled because of local like complaints. Quite a few. Even just like smaller festivals as well that we've even been on the lineups of, like, they've been pulled for like, you know, noise complaints or local reasons. Even one of my local parks, like, it just got pulled, had to get pulled.
The restrictions and the kind of conversation around licensing is complex, and it definitely has a huge impact on why there is a lack of not just festivals but also nightclubs that are able to remain open. You know, I know for a fact XOY had loads of problems. Can I even name clubs? Maybe get told off by people. But you know, XOY had a tremendous amount of problems with neighbours complaining. Same thing with Fabric. And you look at these institutions, and obviously I'm very biased with Fabric because I used to work for them, but they had to go against, like, jump through hoops, so to speak, to remain open. And I just think there is a distinct lack of support from our government. Number one, like, without a doubt, again, me and Gaia were speaking before, when you look at European countries such as Germany, the Netherlands, and particularly cities like Amsterdam and Berlin, that during the lockdown and post-lockdown, they gave a tremendous amount of support to their communities, whether that be through money, whether that be through appointing nighttime mayors, which obviously I believe the UK did for a certain point. We did some work with her. That kind of worked, kind of didn't. I just definitely feel like there isn't enough being done, because also, like we're speaking about originally, like a lot of nightlife culture, you know, it doesn't just support marginalised communities, it supports everybody, but it also comes from a place quite often from marginalised communities. And I think, like, it just feels really disappointing that we're not being supported enough.
And I agree as well. I think I was saying this to Hannah earlier, like, I saw an interview and an article and, you know, talking about what culture means. And I think now anyway, like, culture in terms of, you know, through our government's lens, I think it's now become attached to class, and, you know, culture is going to the museum and going to the theatre, and you know, and there's so much to support, you know, those institutions. And I just think what Hannah was saying as well, like, when you look at the club and, you know, from a government sense, it's people drinking, it's young people. I also want to, like, just say as well, like, I really believe in going to that recent event that I was talking about just before off air. I believe that club culture can transcend generations. My mum is begging me for guest lists to so many of these festivals. And like, I've just gone to an event recently that there were like grown men there, young people there. And I think that, putting a cap on it and like aiming it at the younger generation, I think is false, because I really do believe that it does sound naff, but like, there's no age limit to having fun. If you want to, there isn't.
Do you know, I found it quite sad hearing you talk there when you were like, the government like care more about museums than they care about us. I mean, I don't think the government care about museums personally. I don't think they care about the arts at all. I think they're awful on these things. But this is what has happened. All of us who are interested in culture in some way, you start having this and this is what they do. This is their classic tactic. It's like, let's all fight over crumbs when there's plenty of pie to be had. Do you know what I mean? I think it's very, very sad.
Also, it's a strange thing to not support. And these are figures that come from an all-pie parliamentary group that was founded to investigate the sort of impacts of the nighttime economy and in 2021. And they found that it supports 1.3 million jobs in this country. We are talking about an important employer and, something that makes a real economic contribution. And I do want to come back to solutions in a second, but I just briefly want to return to this idea about noise complaints and the root of that, because I also think that is something incredibly significant politically about what gentrification does to our cities. And the Night and Day Cafe in Manchester is an absolutely hugely significant, iconic music venue. Now, that part of Manchester in the Northern Quarter has been subject to a huge amount of gentrification in the last decade and a half. Like, it's changed so much in the years that I've just been going back and forth there and doing gigs around there. But they're still in the process of dealing with a noise complaint from people that were living near the Night and Day Cafe. Now, the problem with these kind of areas is that they become fashionable. And Fabric's another classic example. The area around Fabric in that sort of Farringdon, Clerkenwell area is an area that at points had been quite run down. So obviously then artists, musicians, the sort of, the nighttime people arrive, and then it becomes like because of the work that the nighttime people do, it becomes like a trendy area to be in.
I'm from Brixton. Growing up and telling people that I was from Brixton would be like, oh, and now it's like, oh my god, Brixton, Brixton, like, oh
It's
my
wild.
god, like it's crazy, like, and I think. It's attaching these like places and these things and like these nighttime people. And I think I agree with what you're saying about the museums and the theatres, not being, it's not that I don't think they're, I do agree that they're not supported, but I think they're way more respected. Like you go to drama school.
Right.
It's more of like an educational route. So there's more recognition and respect from the government, whereas the nighttime people are not so respectable, so to speak.
Here's my problem with it. The nighttime people, we are not respected. The stand-up comedians, the DJs.
Because there's no like classic route. Like I worked on a bar. That was my first introduction to nightlife. I worked on a bar. I cleaned up. You don't even want to know what, from toilets. I served people. I worked hours, like, working in a bar at 18 years old to during lockdown as well. I also worked, having to force people to eat, to give them the meal for their drink and telling people to sit down. And it was like, I don't know, it felt so strange for me as well because, as somebody that loves going out, it was so bizarre having to tell people to sit down and almost like remind myself as well, like, oh my God, these are the rules and you have to comply to them. And, we had the police come in, they shut down the club that I was working in a few times and it was really difficult, particularly in Liverpool, by the way, which is where I work and live at the moment. Scousers are, notoriously, they're rebels and, they don't want to comply with the rules and I hear it. But yeah, it was really, really difficult. But I think the nighttime people are strange because there's not a route to go down that's like, I don't know, like government or like government approved or like a real accredited access into this job. Like I became a DJ because my friends for my birthday got me a DJ course in uni, started DJing in lockdown, just relentlessly pissed off my mum, looping stuff all over again in my room. And I just used to play out for free. I just loved it. I used to message people. I was quite ballsy. I'd just be like, hey, can I come and play? And then it just happened accidentally. Like if you would have told me 2 years ago that this would be my full-time job and I get to do it with my friends, the girls also had very similar like introductions. Sophia's mum taught her how to DJ. Hannah's dad taught her how to DJ. Matty borrowed my decks in lockdown and now here we are. So like it happens accidentally. And I think that's probably why it's not recognised.
But you're right, it's not recognised or respected.
Yeah.
But then, in a way, I would be happy if they left us in our own filth and degeneracy. I would genuinely be happy. Fine, if we're not coming from bits of the arts or culture that you respect, then leave us alone. But the problem is that you have a night and day cafe, you have fabric, these areas become trendy, and then they build luxury flats in them. And that's where the noise complaints are coming from in places like the Northern Quarter. That's where noise complaints around fabric came from. They came from luxury property developments. They often build luxury flats in areas that have become desirable. An area like, basically, my message to all of this is, if you're a stockbroker, get the fuck out of Brixton.
Agreed.
So just continuing on this this topic of noise complaints, what do you guys think could be a solution for this?
I think that there just needs to be way more protection for a lot of what I regard as institutions, even if it is a small restaurant or it's a nightclub. These are pillars within our communities that need to exist and they need to thrive. And I feel that when there is so many issues surrounding, big flat complexes coming in and being built up in these areas, we need to be protected, I think. And I don't have the right language to put that in place because I'm not a lawyer. But I just feel like that is the biggest answer. Sounds simplistic, but it's true, because it's otherwise like, if you think from the other side of people, if there's only a certain amount of people that complain, it's like, I don't know, I just think that there needs to be
also
protection.
The people that complain are the stockbrokers, because they, like what you're saying, they have the means and the language and the access to be able to do so.
Germany's actually declared nightclubs to be cultural institutions. So in Berlin, a club like Berghain has now, the government voted in 2021 to give nightclubs the same status as museums and art.
But this is so important, because also let's rewind to the fact of what we're talking about, of how much money nightlife brings in. So it's just such a backwards way of thinking when we're having to go through all these restrictions and not being cared for, when this is something that puts so much money into our economy. Like, what?
Absolutely.
It's just backwards. Like,
Berlin has also invested £900,000 in soundproofing for Berghain. And that's government money that's going in, because, again, they recognise that the £900,000 investment,
they'll earn it back in one night.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not even joking. I paid for drinks the other week. And it's cash only.
It's so true though. Like, even when we play in Europe, like, it's so plush. We just played in Belgium. I sent a video to my mum, like, what the hell? It's like, it's so developed, like, from everything, even just from like the structure of the festival, just to like the nature of the people. Like, everything is just so, I don't know how to explain it.
I guess they're being nurtured by their culture. I mean, like, we've had in the UK 12 culture secretaries in 13 years. I'm not sure any of them gave a shit about nightlife anyway. But I mean, even just that.
You think Nadine Dorries didn't care? Nadine Dorries, Liverpool's most famous daughter, doesn't care about nightlife in Liverpool?
No, but I think you're right.
If anybody has seen Nadine Dorries, do email in the show. We're a bit worried about her whereabouts. Sorry.
No, but I think you're right. This is about what you're saying. It's about how they are received within their country, how they are supported by their governments. By having that and enabling that removes the sort of like pitting against each other. The stress that UK promoters are under is phenomenal. Often you have agents that are against promoters, which is something that I strongly fight against. We all work together, and it's so important that we support our local promoters. Unfortunately, they have so much to jump through when it comes to delivering a safe, well-organised event. Because, even when you look at the hassles that we had post-COVID, which is still happening to this day, access to the right, even fencing, Harris fencing at festivals, was so limited because of how we can't get it over here. That goes hand in hand with security. You can't legally put on an event unless you have access to police, to ambulance crews. That is something that we have to be acutely aware of, because when you don't have access to those things, or local councils are restricting promoters from those things, that results in cancellation of shows, or shows being done in a lot less, capacity is what you're experiencing when you're in Europe. So that is, I think, one of the issues that we face within the live music sector in particular.
One of the things I wanted to just mention to our listeners, nightlife is a really broad category, and it includes many things, like we said, restaurants and bars included. But just to give you a sense of the UK and how the UK looks, it doesn't exactly follow rich-poor lines. It doesn't exactly follow north-south lines. It might be why it's sometimes quite hard to organise around it. So, for example, you actually don't have that many options in Birmingham, but you do in Halifax, somewhere that's really really rich like High Wycombe, I mean, there's no nightlife there, mate. But it's wealthy. It could have it if it wanted. London, technically...
I've done stand-up in High Wycombe and it's not just nightlife, there's no life.
I'm going to agree there,
and
but
that
I
will be
feel
your last gig in High Wycombe. You will not be welcome back there
one of our
again.
clients is from High Wycombe. Sorry, Gianni.
You know, like, so, okay, fine, it's maybe not north, south, rich, poor, but I think, like you were saying, you could definitely talk about it as a youth issue. Like most people that work in the nightlife industries tend to be on the younger side, but it does appeal to all. Michael Gove himself is a bit of a raver. But I wanted to just talk to you about specifically how you see the opportunities for playing live music.
Okay, there's two parts which I would answer that. First off, when you're looking at territories that are easier to put on events, we also have to be aware, again, when we go back to councils, but also policing issues that we have within certain areas, which can fall into many different categories. Like, I come from a standpoint and, you know, have experience not being able to put on events, whether they be because it's more of an event that's aligned with black music or black culture. So there's a tremendous, another layer that we have to fight through, which is hugely frustrating. I can guarantee if we went and put a license request in to put an event on in High Wycombe that was predominantly black music, you'd probably get rejected, right? So I think that there's things that we have to resolve to do with that to make it easier.
We have got Night Czars in Manchester. We've got one in London. You guys are actually at the front line. Does this position do anything, or is this just window dressing?
If you're talking to two people that are fully immersed in this industry and we feel that we probably aren't aware of those people enough, then there's probably a problem somewhere along the lines. Just to be as simplistic as that. You know, that can come from both sides, from us maybe, you know, I don't know. I think there just needs to be more transparency, more evidence to show of the changes, and more support, really. I think it's all about support, and that's why I think that when we've had the experiences in Europe, it feels supported, because it's almost like it's a whole holistic thing of like how respected and recognised like these institutions are. Like, you don't really get people calling clubs and festivals like institutions, and whereas like that's how they're really received over there. And it's just like it's a whole like 3-dimensional thing, from like the people to the government, and it's a whole I think it's a very there's a consciousness there, whereas I don't really feel that collective consciousness. And I think the North and the South, I do think that there's a lot of differences as well, because living in Liverpool as well, like there's been so many venues across the last few years that have been so close to shutting, and the people that have ensured that these venues stay open are the nighttime people, are the people. It's true, actually,
are the people.
You know,
and it's like, we don't have like, even like if things were happening in the club that I went to, I found it really hard to like contact our local councillor or just like reach out to like people that are supposed to be there within our community, politically as well, that could actually try and help us. And actually it was the people of our community that actually got together, and like Hannah said, they marched. Like, I don't know how we went really about sorting things out like in the proper way, like, you know, because it wasn't accessible, so we did it ourselves. At the moment, you can fight, but we're still losing this battle, basically.
Obviously.
And that is why we need help and we need intervention, and you need the government to get involved, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to wrap up because we've got to let you guys go. But in terms of like, you know, practical solutions, we've talked about things like, I mean, holding property developers to account when they haven't noise-proof houses that they're building in these areas, you know, providing actual support and declaring them to be cultural institutions, and putting money in as a government, because the money that you put in, you get back in terms of the economic contribution of these organisations. But for both of you, is there one specific message you would like to give to policymakers about protecting the nighttime economy?
As a DJ, it's just the luxury of being able to say that my job is to make people dance and, you know, basically fill a room and fill a space and bring my sound and the music that motivates and excites me into so many different areas and countries and, you know, different communities as well, is a luxury. And it is brilliant. And I can see from the other side of the decks, particularly when I've not had a drink and I'm completely sober, because if I was on the other side, I probably wouldn't be sober and I'd be dancing along. So I have a real, I guess, like a way to observe from like a distance of just people really, really enjoying themselves. And from a DJ's perspective, like that's all you really want. And again, it sounds cheesy, but I can watch and see people letting their hair down and having a good time and being with their friends. And I think what that does to people's self-esteem, their livelihood, like their identity, is really, really important.
I can't think of any other parallel experience like that, where strangers go into a room and they enjoy something together, particularly in our very isolated times, especially if you're young now and so much of your life is behind a screen. I think it's quite beautiful. I can't think of anything else. Maybe sports?
No.
Well,
Hannah, anything that you would like, a message that you would like to get across to policymakers on this subject?
I just think to everybody, I think it's about really supporting, and I think looking, you know, whether that be going out and buying a ticket to an independent venue, you know, do the research, do your due diligence, you know, support your communities, I think is hugely important. I think that this is a very important topic that is ongoing, and this isn't me sat here plugging away. I think, you know, we are doing an open town hall meeting, so to speak, in Fabric on the 31st of August, which is bringing in everybody from all different parts of the industry to talk about this problem and how we tackle against it, you know, and just to kind of end on a more sentimental one, exactly like how you're both saying, you know, a clubbing experience and electronic music and live music is integral to your wealth, your health, your upbringing, you know, everything about it is so important. I read this amazing thing recently, maybe Prince said it, but it's like everybody is hurting. And I think like when you go into those spaces, there's somewhat of a healing with it. And I think the fact that we are losing these spaces is hugely damaging and really sad, but there are ways that we can make a difference and come back. And I think by supporting in every way you can, and that can be through local things like Ladies Music Pub, which is a collective that works in this space. It could be things like Power Up, which is a part of a PRS initiative. It could be things like coming along to that meeting, that event, which is free, that you can come to. So yeah, that would be my 2 pence.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very
really
much.
appreciate it. That was great.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
no, thank you.
Geneva emailed in from Seattle to say, I'm a US citizen and I found you through your bonus episode on PSA. And let's just say your phrase, chat shit, get banged, spoke to my soul in a way that no classic elevator pitch ever could. When I started listening, I got hooked, not only on your consistent irreverence towards the various powers that be, but also, let's be honest, the freedom with which you toss around the word vagina. It's not every podcast that so casually references lady parts, and I, for one, am here for it. End vaginal erasure.
Oh, end vaginal erasure, definitely. Also, it's not just vaginas. It seems our chat about clean bums also has struck a chord. We spoke about that last week. Andy, one of our listeners from the States, has emailed in and says, hello, I hope this is the strangest email you received today.
Great start.
Yeah, I know.
Big start. Immediately a big start.
It's a solution to the clean bum issue discussed on last week's show. I happened to be in London during the 2017 fatberg incident. Oh, sorry. The fatberg. I forgot about the fatberg incident.
For non-UK based listeners, and to be honest, probably for even some UK listeners who were not based in London, in 2017, they found a huge fatberg, which was this sort of enormous kind of like iceberg made of all of the toilet paper and stuff that gets and wipes that get flushed out of toilet that had managed to collect itself into one like super fatberg that was just clogging up the London sewage system.
And the reason they call it the fatberg is because our sewers are Victorian. They're very old, obviously, but our diets have changed since the Victorian age and we consume more fat. So all this stuff we were putting down the toilets, the razors, the tampons, the tissues was getting congealed in
with
our human fat. Oh, God. Nonetheless, so the email continues. When I returned home, I started thinking more about the products I was flushing. I found a product called Foam, Fohm, which is sold in the UK. It's a foam dispenser that can be used with toilet paper to ensure a clean bum. I am not sponsored by or affiliated with this company. I am simply just a middle-aged homosexual man who appreciates a clean bum. The show is amazing and a consistent highlight of my week. Thank you so much for saying that. He goes on to write, I feel I should apologise for waiting to pay the show's team a compliment until I had some advice about cleaning one's underbits.
Well, you should, Andy, you should know based on listening to the show that is what we appreciate more than anything else. Waiting until somebody talks about wiping your ass to compliment the show is consistent with the spirit of the show.
We do actually cover serious topics too, though, on this show. It's hard to believe.
It's not exclusively a genital-based podcast.
At the Peter Mullins commented on YouTube about our chat with Grace Blakely on whether it matters that our Prime Minister is richer than the King. Peter writes, it doesn't matter how wealthy a person is, but whether or not they can empathise, preferably through experience, with the plight that many face day to day. Rishi could never imagine the idea of not having or going without. The man has no idea about having the daily feeling of dread that each day can hold when you do not have enough money to feed or house yourself and those around you. I lived like that for 30 years, then married well, like our friend Rishi, and now I have to have opinions on Tory tax policy. But I will never forget what it's like trying to make dry noodles last for several days by skipping meals. I don't mind how much someone has, as long as they're willing to lift everyone else with them. There needs to be better policy because everyone marry a rich person is not an effective means of social mobility.
Thank you very much for writing in. Just before we round up the mailbag, and thanks to everybody for emailing in. We really appreciate it. We love hearing from you. I just want to quickly draw attention to this message from an American listener whose handle is at TCHNFRQ. I don't know what this person has against vowels. But they have gone. They've just abandoned them completely. I guess.
Is it techno frack?
I think it's probably techno freak, right?
Techno
but anyway,
freak,
it's TCHNFRQ, and they say, I consume so much British media. I'm now convinced Britain is just cities filled with Greggs, Nando's, and Spoons. Somehow, I still want to visit. I'm going to be honest with you, techno freak. You're not far wrong. You're absolutely not far wrong. Throw in a few betting shops and a payday loans company and you've got a pretty complete picture of this country. Listen, if you want to get in touch with us about serious issues raised on the show, or if you want to get in touch about genitals, by all means, you could get in touch with us by emailing psuk@reducedlistening.co.uk. We love your messages. We'd also love to hear your voices as well, so why not send us a voice note on WhatsApp? Our number is 07514 644 572. Internationally, that's +44 7514 644 572. And if you're new to the show, remember to hit follow on your app and you'll get every new episode every week.
And just finally, I know I keep saying it, she's a broken record, but the British Podcast Awards has a public vote. The listener's choice. If you'd like to vote for us, we would very much like it if you did. It's free and easy to do. Just go to britishpodcastawards.com/voting. Anyone can vote. So again, just go to britishpodcastawards.com/voting. Okay? It will take 5 minutes. Just do it. All right?
And finally, while we're begging you to do things, if you live in the United Kingdom, I have a stand-up comedy special that is available from Friday, the 25th of August, called Your Power, Your Control. It's the film of my last tour that I did in the UK. So if you live in the United Kingdom or Ireland, I believe you have access to that special. It's streaming on Sky Comedy and Sky On Demand and Now TV from Friday, the 25th of August. It's the day before my birthday. If you want to give me a little birthday present, please watch that stand-up show.
Pod Save the UK is a reduced listening production for Cricket Media.
Thanks to senior producer Musty Aziz and digital producer Alex Bishop. Additional production assistance was by Annie Keatsthorpe.
Video editing was by David Kaplowitz and the music is by Vasilis Fotopoulos.
Thanks to our engineer David Dargahi.
The executive producers are Louise Cotton, Dan Jackson and Madeleine Herringer. And thanks to Cricket Media producer Ari Schwartz.
Watch us on the Pod Save the World YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and TikTok where we're at Pod Save the UK or Pod Save the UK on Instagram.
That's new, you know.
Yeah, we've got our own Instagram now. Pod Save the UK.
Yes, be an early adopter. Get on it. I believe that would make you very cool. That's how they speak in tech, isn't it? Hit subscribe for new shows on Thursdays on Spotify, Amazon or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts.